The sky above Darcelian Prime was the color of bruised copper, smudged with fire trails from retreating drones and the distant hissing collapse of orbital debris. Iseris of the Alaran Dominion stood atop the fractured balcony of the old council spire, the wind clawing at her cloak like it had a grudge. Below her, rows of captured Terrans were marched into containment fields, none worth a second glance. But one among them walked like he was on a beach, not a battlefield. He wasn't tall, not by Dominion standards. His armor was half melted, stained with a suspicious number of food-based colors, and he had a smear of engine grease across one cheek, like a war paint job done in the dark. He squinted up at the sky, muttered something to himself, then sneezed violently. Iseris narrowed her eyes. "Name," the intake officer barked. "Theo Marin, Corporal, serial number 8447-Alpha-Beta. Oh wait, is this one of those interrogations where I give you only that? Because I left the handbook in my other pants." The officer blinked. "This is a processing intake." "Oh, then you also need my dietary preferences. No mushrooms, allergic to flarnberries. And I'm morally opposed to kale." "That's not a preference. That's just ethics." Iseris turned away before her face betrayed the twitch threatening the corner of her mouth. Later that cycle, she reviewed his file on her datapad. No commendations. One disciplinary note for modifying a maintenance bot into a karaoke machine. Psychological profile. Unorthodox coping mechanisms. Not suited for diplomacy. Her brow lifted slightly. She tapped to access the footage from the skirmish in Sector N8. There he was, crouched behind wreckage, shouting coordinates into his comm, while throwing protein bars at a passing enemy drone. It had worked, somehow. The drone had spun mid-air, scanned the objects, and exploded from confusion. Iseris had seen many strange tactics. She had never seen snack-based warfare. The next morning he was assigned to sanitation detail. "I don't suppose I could get a mop with, say, a flamethrower setting?" Theo asked the guard. "For the tough stains and possible ambushes." The guard ignored him. Iseris, watching from a concealed panel in the command hub, adjusted the volume. The drone feeds trailed after him like curious pets. He named one Fluffer Nut. By midday, he'd reprogrammed a floor buffer to follow him while playing Terran music, a jaunty rhythm with lyrics about dancing on moons and losing one's space license. The buffer glowed pink. The hallways, for the first time in months, smelled faintly of citrus. The base AI flagged the anomaly. Iseris overrode the alert. During the cycle review, her second-in-command, a rigid Ellerin named Thurnell, entered the room with a tablet. "Commander," he said, "the prisoner, Theo Marin." "I am aware," she said. "He is disrupting protocol. The cleaning units have begun synchronizing. One refused to recharge today. It claimed it was practicing choreography." Iseris didn't look up. "Are they cleaner?" "Yes." "Then leave him be." She should have stopped there. But instead, as soon as Thurnell left, she issued a private directive. Assigned Theo Marin to scrub the observation corridor, outside her chamber. When he arrived, he saluted the nearest camera. "Morning, invisible jail overlords. Today's cleaning soundtrack will be Funk Across the Stars." She watched him argue with a squeegee for 23 minutes. He lost, magnificently. On the fourth day, he caught sight of her through the one-way panel. Or maybe he didn't. His eyes found the wall and he said, "To whoever's in there, I appreciate the change in scenery. Less mold. Still emotionally tense. But hey, we're making progress." Iseris told herself it was a coincidence. By the 7th day, she knew all 12 songs he sang on rotation. She caught herself humming one during a briefing. Thurnell gave her a look usually reserved for planetary betrayal. That evening, she summoned him. Theo was escorted in, wiping his hands on his pants. "Oh, this is cozy. Nice lighting. Smells less like sadness than the other rooms." Iseris regarded him. "You are aware this is not a recreational facility." "Oh, absolutely. Very rustic. Love the militaristic decor. And you must be the commander with the ears?" She arched a brow. "Ears? They're quite something. I mean that in the most respectful, definitely not flirting kind of way." "Good, because I'd vaporize you." He scratched the back of his head. "Noted. Though for the record, that's a weird flirting culture." She stood, descending the steps between them. Her armor whispered like wind through razors. He didn't back away. Most did. "You mock me." "I don't," he said. "Humans do not show kindness without intention." "Maybe, but mine's real." She stared at him for a long, terrible moment, as if trying to detect the invisible engine behind his words. She saw no gears, no deceit, just that unshakable, maddening calm. "You're truly beautiful," he said. The silence afterward rang louder than war. Even the ambient hum of the systems dimmed, as if technology itself had paused to see what she'd do. She walked past him. He scratched his head again. "So that's either a yes, a no, or an intergalactic death wish." Outside the chamber, one of the drones spun gently and played a soft, celebratory jingle. Theo gave it a thumbs up. Behind the door, Isera stood very still, her fingers brushing the edge of her gauntlet, and thought, for the first time in years, not about strategy or conquest or vengeance, but about a human who sang badly, cleaned worse, and had said something that might have fractured the armor around her without even trying. Theo Marin was beginning to suspect that the base's climate control systems were actively conspiring against his sinuses. Every morning in the observation corridor, the temperature swung from glacial to sauna with the enthusiasm of a broken thermostat and the subtlety of a slap. He'd taken to stuffing his uniform sleeves with napkins, salvaged from the mess hall, and had named them heat regulation modules. When asked, he claimed they were cutting-edge Terran technology. He had not been asked more than once. Still, he showed up each cycle with a mop in one hand, a toolkit in the other, and an expression that suggested he was here either to clean or to dismantle galactic oppression, whichever came first. The corridor outside Commander Iseris's chamber had never sparkled so brightly. He polished it until it reflected his face, then posed dramatically for passing drones. Most ignored him. One beeped in polite disapproval. Inside her private chamber, Iseris watched through the tinted observation pane, sipping a mug of fermented sea root extract that no longer soothed her nerves as effectively as it used to. The problem was not the drink. The problem was Theo Marin. She couldn't look away. He was absurd. He talked to his cleaning supplies like they were old war comrades. He built miniature sculptures out of discarded wiring, one of which looked suspiciously like her, with exaggerated ears and a mop for a cape. He greeted every camera with a different accent. Yesterday, he spoke in what he claimed was traditional Martian cabaret dialect. She had run a scan. No such dialect existed. And yet, he said things no soldier should say. He complimented her without agenda. He smiled without malice. He laughed in a place where even the walls had given up. When she finally requested his presence again, it was under the guise of reassessing prisoner labor efficiency. Theo entered with his usual salute in a flower made of scrap metal. "For you," he said, holding it out. "Not a bribe. Definitely not trying to influence my work assignment. Although if you move me to the hangar bay, I hear the lighting's more flattering." Iseris stared at the offering. "What is this?" "A blossom, Terran symbol of goodwill, or possibly allergies, depending on the recipient." She took it. Not out of sentiment, but because the motion of not taking it would have revealed too much. She placed it on the nearest console and turned back to him. "You are not efficient. I've been called worse. Inefficient, irreverent, incurable, insatiable. Though that one was on a date and might not apply here. You joke constantly. It's a survival strategy. You survived. Stop doing it." "I'll try," he said, and then added, "No promises," before she could tell him not to. That night she didn't sleep. She watched surveillance footage, not just of him, of her officers, of the base, of the war. The stars beyond the station were littered with the wreckage of 1,000 misunderstandings. She watched a clip of Theo fixing a leaking pipe by tying it with heat-sealed bootlaces. It held. He patted it and said, "You're doing amazing, sweetie." Iseris made a sound that might have been a laugh if it weren't alone in the dark. By the next cycle, she'd issued a new directive. Theo was to assist the engineering drones in reprogramming non-combat units for morale optimization. No one understood what that meant, not even the drones. Theo took the assignment with the solemnity of a knight receiving a sacred quest. He recruited 3 repair bots and a hovering diagnostic sphere He named Orbison. Within hours, music was playing softly through the medbay corridors. Not military chants, not Alarin dirges, but something Terran, smooth, ridiculous. Lyrics about hearts and gravitational anomalies. Isaris passed through that corridor once and didn't order it shut down. Later that week, she confronted him during an inspection. He was perched on a crate, calibrating Orbison's speakers. "I gave you a task," she said, "and I gave it flair," he replied, twisting a knob. Orbison chirped. "This is not a theater." "No, but your lieutenant nearly smiled earlier, and I consider that a standing ovation." She opened her mouth to rebuke him, but her gaze fell to his hands, calloused, marked with fine burns from wiring, strong in a way that had nothing to do with weaponry. "I still don't understand you," she muttered. "I get that a lot." He looked up at her. "But I'm not trying to be understood. Just trying to be human, I guess, even in places like this." She looked at him for a long time. "You're out of place here." "Sure," he said, "but I'm used to being out of place. At least here, the food is better than the last outpost I was stationed at. That place had something called meatloaf, and I'm convinced it was sentient." Isaris almost smiled. "Almost?" When he left, she stared at the crate where he'd been sitting. Later, she sat on it herself. The surface was warm. That night, she found herself writing a private report, a hypothetical, a scenario in which a non-threatening prisoner might be used as a diplomatic link between factions. It was never sent. She deleted it, but she remembered the structure of it. 2 cycles later, a drone delivered a small box to Theo's quarters. Inside, a custom datapad case etched with a Terran constellation. Orion, she thought it was called. The stars had been adjusted. The shape now resembled a figure with long ears. Theo stared at it for a long time. Then he grinned and whispered to Orbison, "She's warming up to me? Either that, or she's planning to vaporize me with style." Orbison blinked blue. "Yeah," he said. "It's probably both." Theo Marin stood ankle-deep in coolant fluid, holding a dismantled vent stabilizer like it might explain where exactly his day had gone wrong. A siren whooped half-heartedly above him. Either a warning or a dance number, depending on how one interpreted the base's malfunctioning alarm system. The diagnostics drone, Orbison, blinked orange. Orange usually meant, "Please stop doing whatever you're doing," before the reactor asks for a lawyer. He wiped his brow with a sleeve already damp from efforts to keep a containment corridor from flooding. A new coolant leak, a new crisis, and the latest in a parade of increasingly suspicious, random accidents that had started ever since certain command-level rumors began floating through the station's whisper channels. Rumors that the Terran prisoner had been spending an unusually generous amount of time in places of strategic importance, and that Commander Isaris had not only failed to incinerate him, but might in fact have gifted him a datapad case. From Theo's perspective, the gift had been clear. Either a gesture of strange affection or an early sign of a cultural execution ritual. Still, here he was, still alive, still sopping wet. "Orbison," he muttered, tightening the last bolt. "If this thing explodes again, we're rebranding it as Spa Day and telling everyone it's a health treatment." Orbison chirped in agreement. When the system stabilized and the leak stopped with a triumphant hiss, Theo looked up and found Commander Isaris standing at the end of the corridor. She didn't speak. She never did immediately. Her silences were often more eloquent than other speeches. But today, something in her posture was off. The usual razor-straight lines of her bearing bent slightly. Her fingers were clasped behind her back like they were trying not to betray nerves. "I see you've survived another engineering death trap," she said at last. "I have. It's part of my skincare routine now. Steam, fear, and unintended radiation exposure. Really clears the pores." She walked toward him, her boots echoing with sharp finality against the corridor floor. She paused in front of the broken stabilizer. "Sabotage," she said. 3 incidents this cycle. Always near you." "I'm flattered," Theo said. "My fan club is really stepping it up. I believe someone is testing your resilience. Then they're probably disappointed. My resilience is mostly caffeine and spite." Isaris didn't smile, but she did tilt her head in that specific way he'd come to recognize as amused disapproval. They think you're manipulating me, she said. They think I'm compromised. Are you? I don't know. Her voice, always steel-threaded and unyielding, cracked slightly at the edge. She looked away, not like someone trying to hide, but someone gathering themselves from a cliff's edge. I spent years building walls you couldn't see, she said, inside where no one could reach, where nothing soft could live. Then you came, with songs and jokes and snacks, and suddenly the walls didn't feel like protection. They felt like a cage. Theo stepped closer. Not too close, but enough. You want to know a secret? He said. I wasn't trying to change you. I was just trying to survive. You looked like someone who had survived too much. I figured, if you were still standing, maybe there was room for one more beside you. She looked at him then, really looked. You complimented me, she said, and I didn't believe you. I meant it. I know that now. They stood in silence for a moment as a distant klaxon warbled in the background, probably another minor disaster, or the cafeteria bot attempting another souffle. I could be court-martialed for this, she said. I could be vaporized, he replied cheerfully. I have no intention of vaporizing you. Then we're halfway to a stable relationship by galactic standards. She blinked. That's either very optimistic or very stupid. With me, it's usually both. Later that day, the sabotage was traced to a small group of Dominion loyalists who believed Isaris had lost her edge. The irony, Theo thought, was that she hadn't lost her edge. She'd simply stopped pointing it at everything that moved. She faced the tribunal herself with calm fire and no apology. When asked if she had compromised security by allowing a human prisoner access to sensitive areas, she replied, he was more effective at repairing systems, lifting morale, and repelling pests, biological and technological, than half my officers. If that is compromise, then perhaps we need more of it. The tribunal, unused to Alaran's subtlety laced with defiance, adjourned in stunned silence. By the end of the cycle, Theo's official status was upgraded from prisoner 8447-AB to cultural liaison, probationary, a title that required him to attend meetings, smile at people he didn't trust, and occasionally explain the concept of sarcasm to diplomatic translators. Isaris continued her command, but something shifted. Officers found her more open, still sharp, still strategic, but less distant. Rumor said she even laughed once, loudly, during a diplomatic banquet when Theo accidentally mistook a ceremonial drinking basin for a soup bowl and insisted it was the best consommé he'd ever had. On the 100th day since the war front receded and the peace accords began to take root, Idris stood beside Theo at the edge of a platform overlooking the rebuilt fusion fields. He handed her a small wrapped object. Not a bribe. Of course not. She opened it. A Terran music chip, labeled Songs That Made You Smile, or Twitch. She looked at him. You are relentless. Some people collect minerals. I collect reactions. She slid the chip into her datapad. The music started. Familiar, embarrassing, absurd. You're truly beautiful, he said again, this time without a trace of irony. Even when you scowl at me like you're inventing new ways to erase me from existence. She took his hand, slowly, deliberately. Her long fingers threaded through his, her skin cool but steady. Don't mock me, she whispered. Wouldn't dream of it. And for the first time in cycles full of war and walls and wounds not yet named, Isaris of the Alaran Dominion let herself believe in something as simple and as catastrophically powerful as hope. The stars above spun on, but down below 2 strange creatures stood together on common ground, and somehow, impossibly, it held.